Morning and welcome a little early to Daily Focus. I was asked to go play golf, and so I'm going to do that. But it required me to jump on here and have our Fuel to Life morning devotional just a little early than normal. But hope that you are ready for a great weekend. We certainly celebrate the work ethic of America and the productivity that has been blessed of God and has brought about much of our prosperity by the good hand of God. But He blesses hard work. And so Labor Day weekend, there's a lot of history there starting back in the 1800s when it was recognized that hard work was part of the backbone and structure of America. And if you are part of Faith Baptist Church, you'll hear a little bit about that in the morning service. And we're looking forward to this weekend in celebrating America. All right, Proverbs chapter 25 is dealing with relationships. We talked about relationships to authority, relationships with our neighbors, being neighborly. Today we want to look at relationships with our enemies. And God makes it very clear that we are to have a relationship with enemies and that we are not to avoid it. We are not to become bitter over them. But we have a right way to deal with it. And so Proverbs chapter 25, starting in verse number 21, says, "If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee. The north wind driveth away rain, so doth an angry countenance a backbiting tongue. It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house." And I always think of the statement, when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. But that's probably not the exact interpretation of what God is teaching us in that verse. What He is basically teaching us is that we have a responsibility with those who are in antagonism towards us. Sometimes that you greet that enemy with kindness. There are times that you give him bread to eat and water to drink, even though his actions that may not necessarily have justified or behaved himself in a way to find grace or to have grace. But it is part of the Christian life to extend kindness, to extend grace to those who do not deserve it, for we are the recipients of God's grace, even though we don't deserve it. And so it is a joy for us to be able to extend that. And I think what verse number 21 and 22 is really talking about is that we should not treat somebody in a way because of how they've treated us. And so I think we talked about that a few days ago. We should treat them as we would want to be treated. Now, I think it's going to go on to describe there are some other scenarios, but when I make the decision of how I'm going to treat somebody, it should not be based on how they have treated me. However, there is more to the story, and he says in verse number 23, there are times that you have to meet the decision that someone has made with sternness, with confrontation, with disapproval, because their actions are wrong. I don't take personal offense to it, but I also do not ignore the immorality or the wrongness of their activity. And so he talks about a backbiting tongue. He talks about basically that has a broad spectrum of a critical spirit or a gossiping spirit or a tale-bearing spirit or a revealing of secrets of spirit. That type of person who seeks to do someone else harm, you or someone else, by the way that they speak. And God is saying, you know what they need is a consequence. What they need is disapproval. what they need is to face disagreement. You don't ignore that. You don't pretend like it's not happening. You don't reward that. And so, but God is saying, we don't treat people in a way because of how they've treated us. However, there are some actions, whether they're steered towards us or anyone else, that are just wrong, that must be disapproved. They must meet disapproval in the process. And so he is saying, like a north wind drives away the rain, so does a stern look, or so does the idea that your countenance, an angry countenance, where you clearly communicate non-verbally, if necessary, you do not approve of what they're saying. When somebody comes to you and they want to talk about someone else, the very facial expression that you give them should stop them in their tracks. They should go, oh, you don't want to hear that, before you even say anything, and drive away their tendency to want to backbite, to criticize someone else or something else. And so we have to be able to communicate that and stand firm in the midst of someone's wrongdoing. But then he says it is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. And he said there are times that you just need to separate from the enemy. You just need to separate from the opposition. There are times when wisdom says it doesn't need to be addressed. It just needs to be dropped. And so when we go over to Matthew chapter 5, we find that God deals with this subject in another way, and I think that it gives us great insight as to how to handle our enemies. You have heard, verse 43, Matthew 5:43, you have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and he sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans or the unsaved do the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans do so? Be ye therefore perfect, as your Father in heaven, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. And so God is teaching us here that we have a responsibility to be mature. God is saying, listen, to be able to love somebody who loves you, unsaved people can do that. To want to show favor to your close friends or your family, even the unsaved can do that. But to be able to reach out and be gracious, to love and to care, to bless those that maybe don't feel the same towards you, that have ill intent towards you, or maybe has said something about you. God is saying, listen, you can afford to be, you can be mature in this situation. You don't have to match their immaturity with immaturity. You don't have to match their immature statements with immature statements. And so God is just simply saying, you know what, take the high road and do right by your enemies, and treat them as I have instructed, what the road of wisdom determines. And God says you're going to go a lot further in bringing glory to God and being a good testimony. So appreciate you joining me this morning a little early, and those that have joined me later. I hope you have a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you.